Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. Sorry to be a couple minutes late. I had a little computer problem there, but welcome to this lecture on the Silver Panic of 1893. My name is Lawrence Reed. I'm president of the Foundation for Economic Education, headquartered in Irvington, New York, also with a branch office in Atlanta, Georgia. My topic today, the Silver Panic of 1893, will discuss monetary history of the 19th century to a great extent. Now, you might be wondering, well, what does that have to do with anything that's current? Why do we need to know about such things? Several reasons. There are a lot of people who seem to think that in the days of sound money, the 19th century for the most part, the free market reigned, and whenever we had a panic or depression, it was the result of the free market, not of some government intervention, and that therefore we needed the Federal Reserve System that came along in 1913 to prevent these kinds of cycles and panics and depressions from happening again. Well, I hope to demonstrate that the Panic of 1893, which produced the depression of that year that persisted for the next 3 years and was the second worst and deepest depression in American history, was the direct result of massive and rather a stupid government intervention from the word go. I've always felt, however, that to fully understand this, you can't start talking about the Panic of 1893 with events of a couple of years before. You really have to go quite a ways back. And so a good portion of this talk will deal with the monetary history of the United States from the time of the adoption of the Constitution. Now, the U.S. Constitution, which was adopted in 1789, contains in Article 1, Section 8, language that gives Congress the power to, quote, coin money and regulate the value thereof. I'm sure that our founders who wrote that, or the great majority of them, never expected that that clause would be twisted to mean what it has meant in recent decades. The very thought that government could someday or that the Constitution could be stretched so that government would someday monopolize the issuance of money, divorce it from any metallic backing, and have the complete power to issue as much unbacked, irredeemable, inconvertible paper currency as it wished, was probably beyond the imagination of even the wildest of the few inflationists there may have been early in our history. Our founders certainly didn't intend for that to happen, but it was that clause, Article 1, Section 8, that is often cited as the justification for one aggrandizement by the government in monetary affairs after another. Alexander Hamilton, America's first Secretary of the Treasury, had it in his mind that the country should be on a bimetallic standard. By that he meant using both gold and silver as currency circulating side by side. What Hamilton didn't quite understand, however, was that when government fixes the price of one of the metals in terms of the other, fixes the ratio between the two, it sets into motion what is called Gresham's Law. And economists refer to Gresham's Law as meaning bad money drives out good money when government fixes the ratio or fixes the price of one money in terms of the other. Well, in an effort to implement bimetallism, Alexander Hamilton in 1792 adopted a formal government ratio of silver to gold of 15 to 1. That is to say, he said that we will honor at the Treasury one metal in terms of the other at the rate of 15 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. So you could bring 15 ounces of silver to the mint, and if you wanted, you could get an ounce of gold for it. Or if you brought an ounce of gold to the mint, you could get 15 ounces of silver. And the metals were coined accordingly and honored one against the other according to that ratio. The problem was that that price or that ratio was not the same as the way the free market valued the two metals. In the open marketplace, that actually overvalued silver. Silver wasn't quite worth that much. In the free market, the ratio was about 15.5 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. But Hamilton set it at 15 to 1. Now, you might say, well, that's not much removed from the market price. There's not much difference there. Why would that cause a problem? Well, immediately when you have two different prices, you set up the opportunity for arbitrage, for people to buy in the low market and sell in the dear market, you might say, or to take advantage of the discrepancies at two different places in the prices of these two metals. So what happens is silver flows into the mint and is coined, and gold does not. Now think about it. Here's why. Silver goes to the mint because there only 15 ounces of it will fetch you an ounce of gold. In the marketplace, 15 ounces of silver isn't enough to get you an ounce of gold. It takes 15 and a half. So in effect, Hamilton is saying at the Treasury, we'll pay more for silver than it's worth. So silver goes there and gold goes someplace else. It's not worth as much at the mint as it is elsewhere in the economy and in other uses. You take an ounce of gold to the Treasury, you can only get 15 ounces of silver for it. Out in the marketplace, you get 15 and a half. So you can see that what flows into the Treasury is silver, not gold, and gold goes someplace else. So that, in effect, we are placed on a monometallic standard, single metal, that being silver, because that's what goes to the mint, not gold. That was not what Hamilton intended, but that's what the actual effect of his policy was. We ended up, by the War of 1812, our money was overwhelmingly silver, and there was very little gold circulating as money. In 1834, Congress decided it was going to, quote, fix that ratio. It recognized that the effect of it was to drive gold out of circulation. It wanted to restore a bimetallic standard, but instead of allowing these metal prices to freely reflect market conditions, instead of the Treasury buying one in terms of the other at market prices, Congress simply fixed the price again at a different rate. It fixed it at 16 to 1 in 1834. Well, in the marketplace, gold and silver were still worth about the same, 15 and a half to 1. So they've overcompensated in the other direction in 1834 when they changed the official rate to 16 to 1. Now you get more for your gold if you take it to the Treasury or to the mint than if you take it out into the marketplace. And silver is now in the position that gold was until 1834. It's worth more someplace else in the marketplace, not at the mint. So gold flows into the Treasury, into the mint. That's what gets minted into coins. And by the 1840s, America has flip-flopped from a de facto silver standard to a de facto gold standard, even though the official policy of the United States government is still bimetallism, both metals circulating. But in fact, this change of the ratio now favors gold, and we're on a monometallic gold standard. Well, all of this is interrupted, of course, by the Civil War, when both North and South go off of metallic standards altogether. The South will print lots of paper money and lose the war, and its money will go to zero in value. In the North, they printed greenbacks, which lost considerable value. They were issued with the promise that someday they would be paid back or paid in gold, and that didn't happen, however, until the 1870s. Now, in 1875, Congress passed a very, I think, a model piece of legislation, something we could learn from today. It was called the Specie Resumption Act. And what it was trying to do was to restore the gold backing, the gold convertibility of the greenbacks that it had issued during and since the Civil War. This was a measure in favor of sound money. The Congress declared in 1875 that beginning on the 1st of January, 1879, all of the greenbacks that they had issued in the previous years would be fully redeemable at par. In other words, they weren't going to cheat you, give you 10 cents on the dollar. They were going to give you what they promised, 100% on the dollar, that the greenbacks would be backed by gold on the 1st of January, 1879. Now, you might think, well, when that day came, and they gave themselves that period of time to make sure there was sufficient gold on deposit and that public confidence would be there. You might think that on the 1st of January 1879 there was a rush to the banks to redeem greenbacks for gold. There really wasn't. And the reason was that people had good reason to believe that Congress meant it, that the greenbacks now were redeemable. You could get gold if you wanted it. But hey, in that case, if you know the money is sound, even though it's paper, you probably would prefer to use the paper. So there wasn't a rush from the banks to get gold. So America really had gone to a pretty firm gold standard with the passage of this act in 1875. It made it official. Congress also, a couple of years before, ended the coinage of the silver dollars that had been minted in some years prior. They've effectively just said, look, we haven't been minting them anyway since 1834 very much, so we're just going to officially do away with the silver dollar. Well, that will cause some problems. Both the ending of the silver coinage and the adoption of a gold standard in effect in 1875 will cause problems with people in the country who think that prosperity comes from inflation. And at this time you had greenbackers, an early movement in the 1870s, early 1870s, to get the Congress to print more paper money. These were people who thought that if we just flood the economy with paper money, we'll have more prosperity. They realized by the middle part of that decade, however, that the public wasn't going to go for this. A lot of Americans had been burned by the paper money of the Civil War, and they supported Congress's restoration of sound money in 1875. The greenbacker inflationists, if they were to achieve their objectives, they had to find something else, some other way to inflate the currency. And they didn't just give up when Congress ended the coinage of silver dollars and adopted greenback gold redemption. They decided that they hit upon this idea that they could get the Congress to issue lots of silver once again. But of course, they had just passed the law saying that silver wouldn't be coined again. So they start running political campaigns in the 1870s on the battle cry of free silver at 16 to 1. And what that meant was these inflationists wanted the Congress to start issuing gold and silver coinage, honoring one against the other at the rate of 16 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, and issue lots of paper money at the same time. Elections are won and lost around this theme in the 1870s and 1880s. In fact, in 1878, only 3 years after Congress officially adopted a gold standard, and even before the redemption of the greenbacks in gold began in 1879, it begins to undo this sound money policy by giving in to the so-called silverites. They were formerly the greenbacker inflationists. Now they're silverites, wanting the government to inflate the money supply with lots of silver. They pass in 1878 the Bland-Allison Act, which required the Treasury to buy 2 to 4 million dollars worth of silver every month, minted against gold at 16 ounces to 1, and issue paper money alongside of it, so as to flood the economy with silver, with paper. This, of course, is going to undermine the gold standard. The promise to pay in gold is going to be undermined because now you've got the Treasury buying up silver in issuing paper money that is redeemable in both gold and silver. And what makes this worse is silver isn't worth what the Treasury says it is, 16 to 1. In the real free marketplace, that long-time ratio of 15.5 to 1 has now begun to change dramatically against silver. You have huge silver mines being discovered, the Comstock lode in Nevada. You have countries like India going off of silver standards and going to gold standards, so the monetary demand for silver is in decline. So that by the early 1880s, silver in the free marketplace against gold is going for something like 22, 24 ounces and higher as the decade goes on to 1 ounce of gold. And here you have the Treasury saying, no, we'll pay 16 to 1. What that means is this is a huge subsidy for silver miners. It's the government buying silver at artificially inflated prices and honoring its redemption against gold at a rate that is unsustainable. And so increasingly silver will come to the Treasury, pushing out the gold. People will not take gold to the mint because they're not paying what it's worth. Gold will go elsewhere, go overseas, go into other uses. Well, these silver-gold election battles will continue to be fought in the 1880s. In 1890, the Silverite inflationists achieved their, not quite, but darn close to their ultimate objective, free silver. And by that, they meant, as much silver as anybody can bring. They wanted the Treasury to buy it all, subsidize it all. By 1890, silver has declined in market value so dramatically, it's now going for like 30 to 1 in the marketplace. And yet Congress in that year will pass the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which requires the Treasury to buy 4.5 million ounces of silver every month, mint it at 16 to 1 when silver is worth half that in the marketplace, and print paper silver certificates, Treasury notes of 1890 they're called, at the same time, flooding the economy with this cheapened silver currency and paper money as well. So the Silverites get almost everything they want. This represents almost the entire output of American silver mines. The U.S. Congress is buying it, minting it at a crazy ratio, and causing a drain on the nation's gold reserves and undermining the long-standing promise at that point to honor the greenbacks at par for gold redemption. So you should think of this now as Congress spending like crazy, subsidizing silver and silver states, silver miners and so forth, caving into the inflationists of the day, and undermining the sanctity of the gold dollar. The rest of the world is moving to a gold standard. America, by 1890 now, is moving away from it, and our Treasury's gold reserves will continue to decline. In 1893, we're finally, what is this, 20 minutes into my talk, we're finally getting to the 1893 episode. That's the year when the drain on the gold reserves because of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act becomes so severe that the Treasury's gold reserves dwindle to a very dangerous point. The promise to redeem paper dollars in gold, and those who have held those dollars thinking that they were redeemable on demand in gold, they start to lose confidence. There's a increasing outflow of capital from the United States in 1892, 93, as confidence in our economy and in our currency begins to erode dramatically. Grover Cleveland, former president at this point, having been elected in 1884 and served one term until he was not re-elected in 1888. He did, by the way, win more popular votes in 1888. He just lost in the Electoral College, one of only 4 times in our history when that's happened. He was a sound money man, and after he lost in 1888 to Benjamin Harrison, he sat during those 4 years observing this reckless Congress passing the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. He saw Harrison and the Republicans in Congress spending like drunken sailors, raising tariffs, doing some very bad policy. He decides to run for re-election in 1892. He beats Harrison this time and takes office again as president in March of 1893. Well, what an inauspicious time for any man to take office. We're in the midst of a burgeoning financial crisis in March of 1893. Within 2 months, the country will be gripped by a full-scale panic. The gold reserves of the Treasury are draining fast. The silver legislation is causing horrendous disruptions in the economy. Foreigners are withdrawing their capital, voting against the American economy, in effect, selling their stocks. And in May of 1893, with the gold reserves having dipped below where they were regarded to be a sacred minimum, there's a full-scale panic underway. People are dumping stocks. Unemployment takes a huge jump. By June of 1893, unemployment is about 16% in the American economy. And we've got a crisis on our hands. Grover Cleveland, as our new president, new in one sense, he was just re-elected, but he had been president back in the 1880s. He realizes what has to be done. He knows that this silver legislation, this massive silver subsidy, this unwise ratio, the price, you might say, of one metal in terms of the other that the government is trying to maintain, that all of this is stupid policy, it's destructive, it has to end. So he decides he has to call the Congress into special session to repeal the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. He's about to do that in June of 1893 when he discovers in his upper palate, in his mouth, a bump. It had been bothering him, but it got to the point where he had to see his physician about it. And lo and behold, he's diagnosed with malignant cancer. But he has to keep this secret because the country would be in an even greater panic if it thought the president's very life was at stake, especially when the vice president, a man named Adlai Stevenson, the grandfather of the Adlai Stevenson of more recent times we know of, the vice president, Adlai Stevenson, was a silverite, an inflationist. So Cleveland doesn't want him taking office, and he'll not do the right thing. He won't push to repeal the Sherman Act, the silver purchase legislation. So Cleveland has to have an operation done quietly. They decide to do it on a boat on the East River, and where the doctors go in not this way but through the mouth and remove this tumor. They remove much of his upper palate and jaw, replace the bone and the palate with a prosthetic of vulcanized rubber, and they do it so well that by August the president is back on his feet. The country just thinks he had an extended vacation and maybe a mild illness, and he calls the Congress into special session. This produces one of the most climactic and colorful political battles in American political history. But in the end, Grover Cleveland secures the passage of a bill in both houses that repeals the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, gets the government out of the subsidy business, and moves back towards a sound money system. The country, however, will pay the price for this mischief, this awful policy of government that dated back a number of years. The economy will continue in depression. Silver and inflation agitation continues. William Jennings Bryan will take over the Democratic Party from Grover Cleveland in 1896 and become the Democratic nominee, promising to bring all this inflation stuff back if he gets elected. Fortunately, he lost. William McKinley, the Republican, a mixed bag, but nonetheless pretty good on money issues. He won the election of 1896, takes office as the 25th president of the United States, and then within his first term, he solidifies the Cleveland policy and secures passage of the Gold Standard Act of 1900, which basically does away with that silver stuff. The economy now is set for recovery with new confidence in our monetary system. Well, that is, in a thumbnail sketch, the Panic of 1893. Let me sum it up, and then we'll open it up to some questions until about 10:45 Eastern Time. To sum this up, you can see that the origins of the Panic of 1893 go way back to Alexander Hamilton's bimetallic policy, which he tried to implement by having government fix the price of the two metals, one against the other. That was bad, and they fixed it at a price that didn't reflect real market conditions. We flip-flopped from one metal to another because of that fixing of the ratio. And then after the Civil War, even though Congress tried to restore sound money, at the same time it works to undo that because of the agitation of people who thought inflation in one form or another, paper or silver, would be good for the economy. Boy, does that sound familiar. And this inflation legislation ultimately, though it's based on silver, does derange the monetary system. It stimulates first a boom, then a bust, and a loss of confidence in the American economy, and leads directly to the Panic and Depression of 1893. He who can look back at this episode and say that in any way it was the free market that failed, I think is making a serious mistake. The Panic of 1893 stands as one of many panics and depressions in American economic history that was brought upon the nation by unwise policy from Washington. Manipulation of money and credit, followed by having to pay the piper for that bad policy. With that, let's switch to some questions. And happy to, somebody says if they could have just gotten rid of Sherman. Well, I don't know that that by itself would have done the trick, because it wasn't just Sherman, it was a lot of other people who didn't understand monetary issues that led to the problem. A question here from George Donnelly: how do we get people to understand just how destructive and illusory inflation is? Well, here's one way I think to do that. I like to tell people that they should think of all this as, let's say you go to a concert and you check your coat in, and in exchange for your coat you get a ticket, and then you go with everybody else to enjoy the concert. You know that when you come back you can get your coat by producing your ticket, and that there'll be no more tickets outstanding than there are coats on deposit. But what if during the concert the gentleman behind the coat counter decides he's going to start manufacturing a lot more tickets than there are coats on deposit? Well, you can imagine later there's going to be mass confusion. Lots of people are going to be saying, hey, I got a ticket, it says it's good for a coat, where's the coat? Well, you don't, all you do is cause problems in the economy when you increase the quantity of money and credit through artificial political means. When politicians do it, it stimulates booms and busts. It's done for arbitrary political reasons instead of market reasons that are based upon real conditions in the money supply and the demand for goods. When government inflates the money supply, it drives down interest rates, makes things look good for the moment, but then later you pay the piper for this. Think of money not as wealth itself, but as a claim against wealth. All the money in the world, whether it's gold, silver, or paper, will leave you starving if you can't get goods and services with it. And so when you just manufacture more of it, you are manufacturing more claims to wealth, but not more wealth itself. So that's where I start to convince people of the evils of inflation. Don't think of money as wealth itself. Think of it as a claim against wealth. We need more goods and services, not more claims to them. The next question is, what is your opinion on the bill? This is from Klaus Hohertz. What is your opinion on the bill passed in Utah which approves gold and silver as legal tender? Now, I haven't studied that particular bill, but I think the sentiment is in the right direction. But ultimately, I think what the states can do to restore sound money in the country is pretty limited. And I doubt that our judicial system would uphold serious efforts to dump as legal tender the paper currency that's issued by the national government. So as a statement, it's valuable for states to go on the record saying to the federal government, we don't care for your paper. You're ruining the national economy. Stick to the spirit and the letter of the Constitution and reform the monetary system so as to get away from this unbacked fiat paper stuff. I mean, that's great. I'm all in favor of that sort of thing, but I am skeptical about its actual impact. Next question: is there any way to run a government monetary system that isn't inflationary? That's a good question. The problem is that the whole purpose for government to get into money is so that it can accommodate its deficits and issue more of it. So once you give government the power to control money, you almost have to expect that it, in time, will abuse it. The reason that governments historically don't like what the markets choose as money, gold and silver, is that they can't print that stuff. So it's probably a forlorn hope to think that you could have a government-run monetary system that doesn't sooner or later become inflationary. I think the role of government and money should be limited to pretty much the role that is proper for it in almost every other field. You punish fraud, you punish violence or deception, breach of contract, but otherwise you don't try to monopolize a market, you don't try to be the producer of something people want. You leave private competitive producers to determine these things. Next question. Do you think gold and silver could be confiscated by the federal government in case inflation increases? Well, it could. I mean, there is precedent for that, needless to say. The Congress did it in 1933 and 34. You had to turn in your gold coins to the government within about a month and a half under penalty of $10,000 in fines and or up to 10 years in prison. It's estimated that something like for every dollar in gold that Americans turned in then, they kept maybe 2. I don't know how much they actually kept. I think that the government tried to seize gold and silver today, they'd probably get even less of it than they did then. I just don't think people would be of a mind to hand it over to them. They understand monetary policy, I think, a bit better today than they did 70 years ago. Next question. How to stop government from interfering with private money? Well, I guess Franklin put it well in a different context when he said having a government requires us to be eternally vigilant. So even the smallest of governments, one that does no more than I would want it to do, protect the peace against peace breakers here or abroad, even then you'd have to be awfully vigilant, because this area of money is something that that governments historically want to get their hands on sooner or later. Every government throughout history has had sooner or later an insatiable appetite for revenue. And so, you know, the way to get the most is to take over the monetary system. So, first of all, you have to have a public that understands these things well enough that they'll appreciate the danger of turning money over to the government. Then you have a chance maybe of keeping that from happening. Next question is, with inflation going the way it is now, do you think there will be another Great Depression? If so, what's the best way for us to prepare? Every depression has its own circumstances, its own things that trigger it at the moment that it occurs. They're not identical, so I would say that be careful about predicting such things. But it is clear in my mind that there is so much distortion in the economy from the Federal Reserve's policy of quantitative easing, the last several years of filling the banks with reserves, that sooner or later an awful price will have to be paid for that. And I think the economy is in, at some point, for an adjustment. It'll be at least a recession, could be a Great Depression, could be a depression accompanied by hyperinflation if we don't tame the inflation monster in Washington beforehand. I just don't know, but I'm not optimistic that we can avoid one after all this mismanagement by the Fed. Can deflation be as destructive as inflation? Now, keep in mind, defining these terms is critically important. Inflation I define as an increase in the supply of money and credit, not as rising prices. So deflation is a deliberate decrease in the supply of money and credit. Well, this goes back to the question of what should the supply of money be? And if the government has inflated it, shouldn't it then deflate it as a remedy for that? Well, it shouldn't inflate in the first place. But once it does, it's hard for me as an economist of the Austrian school to say, well, that now we have to decrease it by a certain amount. I don't know what that amount should be. But if the Federal Reserve deliberately decides after a period of inflation that it wants to deliberately contract and artificially jack up interest rates, oh yeah, it can cause a very substantial depression. And it can be just as destructive as if not as destructive, it can certainly be extraordinarily depressing. It's hard to imagine that you could do anything more destructive than have both a depression and disintegration of your money. So I guess an inflationary depression is probably the worst of all. Okay, next question. There's one here that's doesn't require an online answer, so I'll tend to that later. What is your opinion on the IMF and Sdrs? How could they affect the effort to break free from central banks? The International Monetary Fund, in my mind, is part of the problem. I have no prescription for how the IMF should be run better. My only prescription for the IMF is to get rid of it entirely. It is a creature of the collaboration of inflating governments, and so I would do away with it altogether. And also, I think you all should know, if you haven't already gleaned this, that I'm in favor of the abolition of central banking in any event. I don't think, for the same reason I'm against central bathtub making, central green bean production. I mean, I'm in favor of competitive, accountable markets driven by choice, by supply and demand, in every industry, including banking. So if centralizing something means monopolizing it in the hands of government, I'm saying you've got the worst possible situation. Don't go that route. Next question. Okay, we do have a few minutes left here. Let me see, have we gotten to, oh, here's some, okay. How can wait a minute, let me back up here, sorry. What are the banks supposed to do with these huge reserves? Are they going to dump them? I'm sure you're referring to the reserves that they've pumped in the last 2 years since the crisis in the economy began, this most recent crisis. That figure's been massive, and only lately have those reserves begun to flow out of the banking system. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal, front page, maybe 2 months ago, talking about early signs that those reserves now are making their way out of the banks into the economy, which means that ultimately, if that continues, the reserves that sat idle in those banks as banks were improving their bottom line, their balance sheets, and felt that there wasn't enough good opportunities out there to make loans. Now that money is moving out, it will be translated into purchasing power, ultimately into currency, a lot of it, and bidding up prices. We're already seeing the effects of this, I think, through hikes in commodity prices, maybe even the stock market may be reflecting some of this. So it's already beginning to happen. These reserves are working their way out. And as that continues, if it continues, I think you'll see increasing upward pressures on prices. In the next year or so, we will be talking about a disturbing rise in the rate of price inflation, like we haven't been, I think, in many years. Okay, there are several here in the time remaining. Let me pick, how can the unemployment number be unpublished and still valid? Well, you know, there are lots of different unemployment numbers. There's the official rate that the public hears about most often, and that is now about, what, 8.9%, something like that. The real rate is probably higher, and some estimate that it could be well into double digits. It's tough to define. We know it's awfully high. It may have been coming down lately, but well, that doesn't quite answer that question. Sorry, I'm trying to get through as many as I can here in the time we have left. Are there any historical comparisons similar to the Fed's inflationary monetary policies of the last few years? Historical comparisons. Well, yeah, there are many. In fact, let me address that this way. It gives me an opportunity to answer another misconception. There are people out there who seem to think that hyperinflation, high rates of price inflation, only happen in third world countries. It couldn't happen in America because we're smarter when it comes to such things. We wouldn't do that. But hyperinflation has happened in America twice before. Once, of course, in the southern states during the Civil War. But before that, even some of our founders got on the bandwagon and were behind the issuance of paper money during the War for Independence. The Second Continental Congress authorized Ben Franklin to, in 1775, to begin the issuance of paper money, the so-called Continental dollars. And they said at first only print $6 million worth. That's it. We don't want any more. Just enough to help us out at the start of this potential conflict. But then as the war came and then dragged on, they kept issuing more and more paper until by about 1780, the continental dollar became utterly worthless. So that's a rather crude and distant imitation of what the Fed is now doing, but I share that with you as a way to point out that we should not underestimate the possibility of the currency evaporating in value. Never for a moment think that we wouldn't do it in America. We've already done it twice. Okay, George Donnelly tells me I can go a little longer here, so we can take some more questions here. Now they're coming in. How to foster trust and use of private money, such as Shire Silver, PKTP, when government throws the ringleaders in jail or threat of jail to confiscate e-gold. If I'm interpreting that question, yeah, if the government's going to make war on private issuance of competing money, it would be very difficult to get confidence in it. But if the government were not to do that, if it were to strip its own money of legal tender, if it were to completely permit the competition of privately issued currencies and get out of the business of issuing its own, in time, I think you would have confidence in private issues. And in fact, that was the case very strongly from about the end of the Second Bank of the United States in 1836 until the Civil War, when we didn't have a government central bank. We had private issues of currency. They were competing with each other. All you need is an environment where a government doesn't sanction theft, where it doesn't bestow legal tender privileges upon any currency, where people have the choice, free choice, of saying, I'll use yours instead of yours. I mean, we have that now in so many other things. We have it in credit cards. If you don't like American Express, you can use MasterCard. And confidence builds in these private issuers of credit cards because of performance, not because of mandate, which is the case of government currency. Okay, next question. That's not a question. Unpublished unemployment, according to reps with whom I work in Iowa, is in the neighborhood of 30%. Peak unemployment in the Great Depression was 25%. Do current circumstances count as a depression, at least in Iowa? Why or why not? Depression has never been so formally defined that there is a fine line expressed as unemployment rates where you have one and when you don't. In the past, unemployment rates in excess of 10% have often been taken to mean we have a depressionary environment. It's a little bit slippery, a little bit arbitrary. If unemployment in Iowa is 30%, I would say, yeah, that's a depression. So it's rather arbitrary. I would call nationwide what we've experienced in the last couple of years at least as a very deep recession, if not a depression. Nationwide, it's not as bad as the Great Depression. Unemployment there actually peaked out around 26, 27%. It's not quite that bad. Okay. How high are the chances that we will actually see competing currencies or sound money in the next decade? I don't know when we'll see it, but I frankly am optimistic that we will, because I have no confidence in unbacked, irredeemable, inconvertible paper money issued by spendthrift, irresponsible governments, their political appointees with their monopoly monies. I just have no confidence. Sooner or later, either because they've destroyed the currency or they've so eroded it that people come to understand the hazards of central banking and government money, that will take the measures needed to restore sound money and competing currencies. I don't know when that'll happen, but I think the case for it is strong, and we just have to plant more and more seeds so that the public is ready for that when the circumstances permit it. Uh, I'll just add very quickly, we need to convince people that money is not so different from other commodities. Most people wouldn't give the government the power to monopolize the production of green beans or automobiles. Giving it that kind of power over something as important as money is horrifically destructive. Kate is asking me to repeat that soundbite where I said I have no confidence in their paper money. I think the way I put it was I have no confidence in politicians and their irredeemable, inconvertible, unbacked paper money that pours forth from their political appointees. I said it better the first time, but anyway, there's no reason to have confidence in those guys. None whatever. Do you have any comments on those competing options, Larry? And I think you're referring to what might emerge in a free marketplace in the form of private competing monies. Well, I'm partial to gold only because gold has been chosen naturally over the centuries as superior money. But that doesn't mean I want any kind of law that would bias the market in favor of gold. I want it to compete as freely with anything that anybody freely brings forth and says, hey, use my money, this is better. They might be right, but we'll only know that through the genuine competition of free currencies, free to compete in the marketplace. That may sound like a stretch to some people because we're not accustomed to it, but it is a principle that's no different from the principles we rely upon in the production of almost anything else. I don't know what people will eat if we don't tell them they have to eat green beans. Maybe they'll eat cauliflower. Maybe they'll eat carrots. Maybe they'll eat a mixture of these things. But we'll only know what people want and what serves them best if we let them choose, and between a multiplicity of private providers. That's a principle that applies to money just as it does the production of anything else. Okay, I see we have a few minutes left. Let me see if I've missed, kind of skipped through. I'll look for some new ones, but I'm also checking back to see if I've missed any. Oh, somebody here says, what about stocks as a base of sound money? I don't personally know how that might arise, but again, if somebody wants to come forth and say, I'm going to privately issue something I'll call money, you can use it as a medium of exchange. It's based upon maybe a basket of stock values. I'd say more power to you. We'll see if it works. I'll look into it, but maybe I'll pick something else. I certainly want people to have the freedom to make those choices. You know, it really comes down to, do you have faith in people making choices in the marketplace and producing positive outcomes, or do you want to confer your faith upon a handful of people and give them political power and expect that they will somehow know what the rest of us want? That's preposterous. We're starting to use grams of silver embedded in laminated cards, Shire silver, as money. What's your reaction to that? Hey, I'm all in favor of it. I think that's great, and I hope the government doesn't step in and try to crush it. Again, anytime competition emerges in the form of new choices for people in anything, I'm in favor of it. And anyone in favor of the free society, I think, should support that. How soon before the U.S. dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency? Very good question. That I don't know, but that could happen at any time. As you know, people, governments in particular around the world, the Chinese in particular, have been making noises about this. And I think we ought to be as well. I mean, I don't know why people would want to put so much faith in paper currency that is so massively manipulated by our Federal Reserve. I understand why people around the world are saying, why do we want to put our eggs in the dollar basket when we have the Federal Reserve manufacturing them at such a phenomenal rate. If that day happens, when the dollar is abandoned around the world as a reserve currency, it will be a sad commentary on the character as well as the policies of our elected leaders who've allowed government spending and deficits and the creation of money to race out of control. I see that we're about out of time, but let me just end by saying if you're interested in these issues of money, tomorrow I'll be talking at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the subject of the origin, nature, and history of money. So we'll go back a little further in history and talk about things like how gold and silver emerged and when paper came on the scene. Thank you all for participating. I appreciate this opportunity, and for those of you who will be tuning in tomorrow, I look forward to 11 a.m. tomorrow too. Goodbye.